provides the basis for every modern experience we have today. Food and fiber are the cornerstones of civilization. Agriculture has and continues to evolve since it was first developed 10,000 years ago. From slash and burn agriculture in the rainforest to irrigated desert agriculture of the Native Americans of the Southwest, to plow improvements of John Deere, the man, not the company, to the western expansion of agriculture into Boulder County in 1860, to the cotton gin, to the invention of the internal combustion tractor, to the combine, to broadleaf herbicides, to the advent of hybrid seeds, to synthetic nitrogen, to improved animal breeding, to the banning of DDT, to center pivots, to drip irrigation, to integrated pest management, to the Organic Foods Act of 1990, to the use of soil bacteria to control crop insect pests, to disease-free tissue culture propagation, to herbicide resistance and BT biotechnology, to strip tillage, to no-till vegetable production, to precision agriculture. Such innovations have been and are being tested by people over time in the field and the marketplace for their utility and value to society. None have been without impacts, some positive, some negative, to the environment, to human health, to labor markets, to farmer profits, to food supply, to food quality, to the cost of agricultural inputs and products, and more. Assigning value to these often depends on a person's perspective within the agriculture and food continuum, from soil to fork, as some say. What is positive from one vantage point may be negative from another. Current challenges from climate, population, foodborne illnesses have aroused increasing interest in ensuring a stable, abundant, and safe food supply. Obesity in the United States, access to nutritious food, transport distance of food, corporate interests in agriculture, local and regional food systems, and other issues have gotten the attention of those interested in addressing these food and agriculture concerns through Farm Bill, legal, policy, educational, and other channels. Know your farmer, know your food is one current motto of the United States Department of Agriculture. However, many in our community are just beginning to fully understand the diversity, complexity, and rich agricultural history of agriculture in Boulder County. Merriam-Webster defines sustainability as capable of being sustained and of or relating to a method of harvesting or using a resource so that it is not depleted or permanently damaged. Sustainability is the hot topic of our time and is often couched in terms of environmental, social, and economic indicators. Today, those areas of sustainable agriculture that are most relevant to production of food and feed in Boulder County will be explored. We will examine these through the perspectives of agricultural professionals working in the field of sustainable agriculture. Later, as an aside, the Crop Plan Policy Team will host a farmer forum on January the 19th to explore these topics from the perspectives of commercial farmers in Boulder County. Today, with us, from left to right, your left and right, are Tim Carney with the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, the Delivery Streamlining Initiative Unit in Colorado. And Tim is formerly the District Conservationist with NRCS in Boulder County. To his right, his left, Cindy Lair, the Western Association of State Departments of Ag Rep with the Administrative Council for the Western Sustainable Agriculture and Research Education Program. And Cindy is also the manager of the State Conservation Board for Colorado Department of Agriculture. Next is Jim Riddle, University of Minnesota Organic Outreach Coordinator. And Dawn Philmony McFadden, Professor of Agribusiness and Extension Ag Business Economist at CSU, and former interim program leader of organics with the USDA Cooperative State Research, Extension, and Education Service. Please see more details on their bios in your program. You have that with you in front of you. Okay, so we're going to launch into a panel discussion, and we've generated some general questions as part of the process, but we're hoping that much of this will develop itself through the panel. We'll have each panelist offer a 3-minute intro, And I need staff person down front, if we can, please, with that part of it. A 3-minute opening statement in which they'll comment on what does sustainable agriculture mean in your work. We have a timekeeper in front that will give you a 1 minute left and then a stop. So we're going to try to keep the intros abbreviated, and then we'll launch into more panel discussion. So this intro will be followed by an open and frank discussion that is far-ranging and good-natured. It will be prompted by questions from David Bell and I, as needed. We'll conclude the panel discussion at 15 minutes ahead of schedule. So we'll conclude the panel discussion at 5:15, 5:20, and then have another break for you. And then we'll bring back Pam and Raul, and we'll have the 6 panelists field your questions from the note cards. So, are we ready? We'll start with Tim Carney. Tim, what does sustainable agriculture mean in your work? And I think some of our microphones are working. Are they working?
That one and the one all the way to the
right. Okay. So the one in front of Don is the only one that works.
Can we bring that one over?
Yeah.
You share it. You share it.
I'm going to keep one and let these guys pass.
Yeah, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thanks for inviting me here today. I do have a lot of experience working in Boulder County, and I very much appreciate the community and the government and organizational investment in high-quality environmental services, quality landscapes. So it's a pleasure to be here. My work has been primarily with the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. I've worked with the on-the-farm and ranch and forest land development of conservation practices and systems with farmers and ranchers and landowners. I also have experience at the management level, at the regional and state level as a conservation program manager in Colorado. So I have overseen conservation practices, financial assistance and technical assistance programs, and conservation easement programs. And in all cases, the farmers, ranchers, and the community of Boulder County have been actively engaged in that. From my perspective, sustainable agriculture is a system that provides high-quality, nutritious foods and other products and services, forest products, barley for beer, I include in food, nutritious, high-quality products. That provide environmental services while providing those commodities. Those services I call factors like soil quality, water quality, air quality, wildlife habitat, general landscape health. At the same time, these systems must be economically viable, they must be efficient from an energy perspective, and they need social and community support. And so if we can have those kind of systems in place, I believe we can have a sustainable landscape.
Thank you, Tim. Cindy Litter.
Thank you. It's really nice to be here today, and I know a lot of familiar faces in the audience because I used to work for Boulder County Parks and Open Space, and that was a great part of a great 10 years in my life. Currently, I am here today representing the Western Sustainable Ag Research and Education Program. That is actually a program within the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. That's an agency within USDA. And it's a joy to be a part of that organization. It has opened up my world to have more emphasis and more exposure to the way agriculture and a lot of people that are trying to make agriculture more sustainable throughout the western United States, but also throughout the country. So it's a pleasure to be a part of this organization. Our goal is to help provide research and education grants that will foster cutting-edge technologies to sustain and enhance American agriculture. And it's not only funding grants, which if any of you are ag producers or ag professionals, these grants are here for you if you have a new idea, and I'd be more than happy to talk to you about it during the break. But through that educational process, through that research process, through these grants, we come out with a better understanding of these new ideas and what can actually be carried out in the field. And it has a very strong component of educating farmers, ranchers, educating ag professionals like in the Natural Resources Conservation Service and in the Extension, people that are out there working with the land, the people on the land. And as far as what I think that a good definition of sustainable agriculture, it's definitely an integrated system of plant and animal production practices that have site-specific application that will, over the long term, in time, satisfy human food and fiber needs, enhance environmental quality and the natural resource base upon which the agriculture economy depends, and make the most efficient use of non-renewable resources and on-farm resources, and integrate where appropriate natural biological cycles and controls sustain the economic viability of farm operations, enhance the quality of life for farmers and society as a whole. And I think that as we work on this through the SARE program, our goal is to have a wealth of information that is derived from these research projects. And they are available. We have a website. I brought a lot of materials that you're welcome to take home with you. They're on the main table out in the lobby. How to fill out a grant proposal, how to make use of the information that's been derived from these really innovative projects that are done out on the ground through the work of farmers and ranchers. So I really, I'm going to close now. I want to tell you how much I appreciate having the opportunity of working with the farmers and ranchers that lease Boulder County Parks and Open Space ag land. They are truly the stewards of your land. I respect what they do, and I'm glad they're there. And I look forward to having more dialogue with the variety of producers that will be leasing Boulder County's land in the future. Thank you.
Jim Riddle, thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me here, even though it was only about 2 weeks ago that I got the invitation, but luckily it fit in my schedule. And I do work for the University of Minnesota Organic Outreach Program, and just a couple of things. I'm on the national leadership team of eOrganic, which is a community of practice within Extension developing organic content. We have hundreds of articles, videos, webinars on the National Extension site, and there's some cards in that back table about that. And I also brought a bunch of brochures that I did for the Minnesota State Fair, What is Organic Food and Why Should I Care?, that summarize the regulations, but also a lot of the research that's coming out. And before I share some of my thoughts about sustainable ag, I just have to say, well, I'm very impressed with the work that you're doing here to protect farm and ranch land in Boulder County. And we got a chance to go to the Boulder Farmers Market today. What an incredible resource happening that is. Someone who sold and developed farmers markets in my area. It's great to see that. And I hope I get a chance to respond to the previous speakers, but just a couple of words. I agree with Raul that the tremendous benefits of organic production systems, but I'm very uncomfortable with the advocacy of bringing transgenics into organic. I'd much rather see the benefits of organic being brought to conventional agriculture. I think there's tremendous benefits to be gained there. But what does sustainable ag mean in my work? I really work in the organic sector, and we focus on building soil organic matter in the soil ecosystem, and you have to be doing that in a sustainable system. But also to be sustainable, I think maximizing the use of perennials, tree crops, brambles, grasslands, prairie, and if in annual crops, there have to be true soil building crop rotations and cover crops, and a recycling of nutrients, and making the system carbon positive, which is being done in organic production. conserving and enhancing the genetic and biological diversity in the agro-ecosystem, and that's something I'm very uncomfortable with genetic engineering because it's narrowing the genetic diversity. But the system also has to have livestock in it to be truly sustainable. We have to address the energy sources. That's something organic standards don't touch on, but really integrating solar, wind, geothermal, hydrogen, truly sustainable energy sources into agriculture more than we ever have. Doing more work to extend the growing season, both harvest and storage as well. Empowering farmers, empowering the farm workers, the ranchers, the processors, the buyers, and the eaters to know how their food's grown and where it's coming from, but especially the youth. To be sustainable, we have to get the littlest kids on the farm, get people cooking again, and caring about agriculture, gardening. But to me, sustainable is based on a precautionary approach that's transparent and accountable and minimizes the use of toxic inputs, conserves water and soil resources, and is site-specific, that's adapted to the local region, to the climate, to the biology, to the hydrology, and to the culture of the region. I see that as something that you're making progress on here.
Thank you, Jim. Don Thilmany.
Can everyone hear me without a microphone? Yeah. Technology is not our friend today. So I'm Don Thilmany, and I'm here in my role at Colorado State University. And I'm an economist, so I'll do what a typical economist does and talk about the macro level and the micro level. At the macro level, where I see sustainability needing to focus is on balance. And I got a chance to go into DC and work with the organics program. And I guess I, as an economist, had heard long enough about, well, if small farms or organic or alternative ag was meant to be, it would be there without any help. Well, if you look at farm policy in this country, it's still mostly rooted in policies developed during a Great Depression and has not progressed to actually be balanced and allow all types of agriculture to compete on a fair footing. So my work there and my work since returning, looking at policies and what is being done with innovations and policies to support organic, local, know your farmer, know your food, and the conservation titles is kind of what we try to do at the macro level, not just me, but my whole department, because it is about balance and trying to find some policy instruments that give the right incentives. At the micro level, we work on programming with technical assistance on business planning with farms. Again, there was a little bias in our programs and departments to only work with conventional agriculture, and we've tried to do a lot more with small farms, sustainable farms, organic farms, and farms looking at direct markets. Some of that in the Building Farmer programs your county initially invested in, and we appreciate that. We've now grown it to several regions in the state, and now in 5 states of the western region. So Adrian was the impetus for all that, and we've helped him grow it and share his vision, knowing that it's not just about farmers having knowledge, but they also have to have a community to anchor themselves in. And then in the middle is what we're doing with trying to look at markets and institutions and buyers and where those can support sustainable agriculture. We are entrenched in a great consumer market here for organic and local foods. Not everybody has that fortune. Jim will tell you there's parts of Minnesota and parts of Colorado who don't have the support you guys have provided your markets. But we are trying to look for marketing, processing, value-added opportunities that also bring some balance again. It's not that exports are inherently a bad thing. It's that they kind of got out of balance and we forgot how to feed our homesteads before we worried about feeding the world. So.
Great, thank you, panelists. Intro. David and I powwowed on the side, and since we're limited with microphones, I'm going to MC or moderate this whole section. So I'd like to start you guys off with a question, and if you're comfortable with this, we don't have to go in the order that we did. If anybody has the burning desire to start with this question, just raise your hand. And what I'd like to do is to create an opportunity for you guys to have as much a discussion amongst yourselves and not have to go to these questions unless we need to. So The first question is the big one. Can agriculture be sustainable? Anybody want to start with that one? I still think we only have one mic, so I apologize for that.
My background and perspective is working with both traditional and specialty crop farms, conventional, organic, and inorganic farms. And I look at sustainability again from an environmental and an economic and a social perspective. And I think from the environmental perspective, that sustainability in this area can be achieved. And I think it is being achieved in many cases. I think issues with quality, good soil quality, reinforced through crop rotations, high quality water supplies, good irrigation water management and water distribution systems and policies, support for grass-based grazing and other integrated farm and ranch animal and plant animals agriculture systems where you're balancing the outputs and the inputs, where you don't have a pollution issue, but those potential sources of water quality issues become nutrients that benefit the crops and the soils. I think those things are very achievable, and I think in many cases they're being done in this area. I think a key to sustainability is infrastructure. And a good example of how some of that infrastructure is supported here are the network of, I think, over 5,000 acres of ag land along the Leggett irrigation system. And there's a complex here basically south and east of Longmont where Boulder County and City of Longmont open space and private landowners are joined in an agricultural system with a common irrigation network where the network is relatively safe from access for non-agricultural uses. And so there's a critical mass there of land and water that helps support that sustainable system from an infrastructure perspective. I think the challenges with sustainability in this area, for example, and in others, is the social support and the economic viability of the agricultural producers, and I think that's the biggest challenge. They want to see certainty in their economic situation, in their land tenancy, or in their operating parameters that they have to work with. I think that's critical to sustainability here.
Thank you, Tim.
I like this question because it can really bring in a diversity of answers, and there's no yes or no answer to that. Can agriculture be sustainable? I think it's a continuum, and that we're always striving for. And as we look at I think everybody in this room probably has their vision of what a sustainable farm would look like. And I think as long as we can enter this discussion without thinking that every farm has to look like that farm, we'll get farther down the road with our discussion. And we think a lot about small farms and ranches and how they can be sustainable. When we start looking at the larger farms and ranches and how they can be sustainable, it's possible and it's workable. And it's worked up until now. I don't like to say that our conventional farms and ranches are doing wrong. I think that they are doing a lot of things right, otherwise they wouldn't be in business today. If the new methods that we're putting out there are not going to pencil out in the end, that's not sustainable, and we can't force it. So we have to work together to find ways to make new technology useful. And a lot of times that's through incentives, not regulation. And that's what I appreciate so much about what the work that the Natural Resources Conservation Service does, is they do get new technology and traditional technology out there and useful by the landowners and supporting agriculture. You know, the question, can agriculture be sustainable? I think we had a really good example of the strides we've made through time. And I don't want to get back into talking about the Dust Bowl. I know that was discussed earlier today, but we've gotten out of, I don't know if we're completely out of a really terrible drought from the 1990s and into this decade. And the beauty of that is we have not seen nearly the soil erosion that we could have. And it's because of the really hard work that's been done with the partnership that we have going for conservation, and that's the landowners, the conservation districts, and the Natural Resources Conservation Service. I'm putting in a plug for you, Tim. But it's good to have the vision of what we want the future to look like, but I also think it's important to be able to look at what we have now and the beauty of what we have now working together. It's not to say we're done. We have a long way to go. And my goal as I work with SARE and with Sustainable Ag teams and partners is to find a way for all of agriculture to be more sustainable. And it doesn't mean that all of agriculture has to turn into small farms and ranches. We can have very sustainable, large farms and ranches, but it has to pencil out in the end. So that's one of my main thoughts at the moment.
Well, when I first read this question, can agriculture be sustainable? My response was it must be. I mean, the choice is hunter-gatherers, and we really aren't in a position to all do that. I am missing the deer opener in Minnesota today by being here, but I guess from my experience, and I am a Soil and Water Conservation District Supervisor and work closely with the NRCS, and I served a 5-year term on the National Organic Standards Board and worked closely in DC, but the answers to sustainability aren't going to come from DC, from Washington, DC. They aren't going to, I mean, the biotech, ag chemical industry, there's a total revolving door between that industry and the leadership at USDA, FDA, even the Supreme Court. And I mean, that is just the reality that we operate under. And we aren't going to find the kind of innovations that we need coming from DC. There's a lot of programs that help, that provide assistance, whether it's SARE or NRCS or the Organic Research and Education Initiative, but it really takes local leadership. It takes local communities investing in their food systems, making conscious choices. We are going to keep an agricultural base. We are going to keep rewarding farmers. We are going to bring young farmers into the system. We're going to buy the food grown by our local producers, and we're going to promote the region as a food destination, as a place for good, healthy food where the dollars are recycled. And it's certainly not going to come from silver bullets like novel genetic constructs that have never been part of nature, never been part of the human diet, which is a complex ecosystem in and of itself. Our gut has flora and fauna and enzymes which have evolved over time to digest the foods that nature provides. And now, since the mid-90s, totally novel genetic constructs have been introduced into the human diets with no testing, no human health, no labeling, so there cannot be epidemiological studies to find out why during the same time the levels of obesity, diabetes, food allergies, cancers have skyrocketed parallel. But is there a correlation? There's no way of knowing. But at any rate, this is not a sustainable food system that has been brought to our tables in recent years. And the places that are developing sustainable systems are doing it because of a commitment, leadership of local people like I see here in Boulder County.
I get to follow that.
Yeah.
Okay then, for levels? Okay, so I guess as an economist, one thing I would say about sustainability is I was glad that the speakers brought up the economics to sustainability, because that is an issue. And I guess the great concern that anyone who delves into farm performance looks at is if you get too overly dependent on resources you don't directly control, or that your community that you draw on directly controls, it does become a bigger struggle to be financially sustainable. And I guess that's some of the concerns that happen with the huge growth in inputs that were used in agriculture and that were talked about by the speakers, is that the more we do rely on things that need the kind of research that require them to be done maybe only in a handful of places in the country, means you're going to have to purchase those inputs from outside your area. They may not be as place-based. That's particularly of concern in developing countries where, unlike Erie, who does the rice research, not all research being brought to those areas of the world have been developed to suit them. And so you don't always see the sustainability you want to. So I was very glad to see the public money research going on by Erie with rice. But we have to realize a lot of what's going on with genetic development is very privatized, and there are people looking to make money from doing it. And there hasn't been great evidence in the economics field that for the use of those GMOs, that there is any benefit financially to farmers. So I guess that's my greatest concern as an economist, is it's an additional risk because you're having to buy that input at its market cost, and it may give you some better pest resistance or yields, but they know how to price it and what that benefit is for you. So it doesn't really seem to help the bottom line of the farmers, except for getting rid of some risk. And we saw the rice growers very, very happy that a risk of floods had been mitigated. But when we have companies pricing those inputs, knowing those benefits are there, it seems like a lot of those returns don't go to the farmers, they go to the agribusinesses. And we're not in a position in Colorado where a lot of those agribusinesses are sourced here. So they leave our economy, and of course I'm employed by a state institution, so I wanted to stay here. So that's some of my concerns about what we saw about some of the innovations happening with science. But I would reiterate what a couple of people have said. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all solution to sustainability, and my greatest concern is we did not have a balance in the types of farms and the types of food systems that were taking root up through about 10 or 15 years ago. We've seen some reversal that shows up in the census data, but it's still hard to know how financially sustainable those new systems are going to be, because all beginning businesses have struggles being sustainable financially. So it's hard to know which share of them are going to be around in 20 years and what kind of things the markets are going to have to do to support them.
What sustainable tools, strategies, and resources are farmers using to farm? What do you see currently out in the fields? What are people doing that are sustainable?
I'll just start off this with a few of the things I see in the Midwest. It's certainly a huge increase in grass-fed meats and dairy. And that is just win-win all the way around, and the science shows that the end products are more nutritious for humans as well. Exciting thing, some people in my county have built a geothermal heated greenhouse. I think there's tremendous potential to do a whole lot more with that in this region as well. So that's very exciting. The whole organic no-till, using a roller crimper to terminate cover crops, is very promising. There's limited success, but it's working in some areas, and I think that's a great innovation. More perennial crops, whether it's things like Wes Jackson is doing at the Land Institute, developing perennial grain crops, or just common, more nuts, tree fruits, etc. I'm seeing a lot more, but not enough, with intercropping, companion planting, and establishing pollinator habitat like Raul mentioned at the UC Davis gardens there. School gardens and food preparation. I'm seeing a lot of school districts now putting in gardens and various farm-to-school programs, getting hands-on learning about food and farming. Some of the most exciting work I see is the urban agriculture, such as Will Allen is doing with Growing Power in Milwaukee, and that's spreading to a number of other cities, and using vermicomposting and polycultures, fish, and really tight nutrient cycling, and then all the local marketing initiatives, because you got to have a market like Don says. So those are just some of the things I see. Thank you.
I appreciate those ideas, and not ideas, but working projects, working activities that are out there. I think that the most sustainable tools, and I'm going to speak broadly here, are ones that take a systems approach, that look at the whole system of the land, of the community, of people, and finding a way to close the loop on that. And I have to applaud the staff of the Parks and Open Space Department, because they've been trying to get a new project funded through different means, which would, I think, epitomizes a systems approach, and that is where they're going to take I don't even know what you're calling the project. It's a biochar project where they take a lot of the material from the beetle kill up in the mountains that you need to get out of the forest, putting it through a biochar processing machine, and having that available out on the ag land, and to be able to incorporate into the soil, to be able to improve the soil health. And you're closing a gap on this. You're looking at it from a whole systems approach, and I think it benefits so many different facets of the land you manage. And I applaud those types of thought processes. And these are and systems approaches to sustainable agriculture that not only look at these land inputs, but also look at the communities that are being served and that are waiting to be served through the local land. So I think that's an important part of this. In Boulder County, I see some challenges, and I know we're going to talk about challenges in a little bit, because some of these things that can be done in the Midwest, or some of the things that can be done in different parts of the country, we're challenged because we are in a very arid landscape here. So we support grass-fed beef, grass-fed dairy, things like that. It can be very challenging to be able to support a dairy from grass-fed, from purely grass-fed. So we have our challenges that we're working with. We're dealing with a deficit of water. We don't have enough water to work with at times, and water's very expensive. But I think the system, to get back to it, the systems approach, I think, is really where the most successful and sustainable projects are going to be, that encompass all of these facets.
So from my perspective, some of the tools and strategies and resources that farmers are using for sustainable farming include practices like integrated pest management, where they utilize a targeted scouting, planning approach to managing whatever plant, insect, and other disease and pest threats are pending or present in their agricultural systems. Encouragement of things like pollinators, use of crop rotations, efficient use of fertilizers, proper choice of resistant, drought-tolerant seed and crop varieties, balancing again of nutrients from animal agriculture sources on farm or near farm or in the community and watershed with the requirements on their land, in order to fully utilize that in a cycle that's beneficial to the soils, the plants, the animals, the water quality, etc. Irrigation infrastructure, irrigation improvements, things like drip irrigation systems that utilize 1/10 of the water of a traditional flood irrigated system and can help extend irrigation supplies to more of the landscape and maintain quality, reduce deep leaching systems, or deep leaching of irrigation water. Again, things like business planning, the benefits of programs through the Extension Service, through the ag finance community, through the universities for cost of production and business planning templates to help producers become and maintain economic viability. Access to local markets. There's a great farmers market system in Boulder and throughout the Front Range of Colorado, and actually it's growing. And I think in the future, utilization, again, of what I call environmental services markets. If clean water and wildlife habitat, carbon sequestration, soil quality are really important, folks should be willing to pay for that. And the producers on the landscape can deliver that. And if they have economic incentives to improve those environmental services, they will do so. I think there should be support, and there is in this area, in the community for farmers' organizations. There's the Farm Bureau, there's conservation districts, there's the Organic Producers Association, there's the St. Vrain Valley Progressive Farmers. There's a whole number of those, and I think those are very important and part of the strategies that farmers in this area use for sustainability. One other area I'd like to mention is the use of conservation easements, whether that be by Boulder County, by the American Farmland Trust, Colorado Cattlemen's Association, and others. Those are private market, conscious choices to maintain agricultural productivity in the landscape through voluntary sale of development rights in exchange for a promise of long-term or perpetual agricultural production. I think we need to support those, and a lot of farmers do.
I'm actually going to blend this answer with what I also see as challenges.
Okay, great.
I think there's a lot of things people are doing, and I think a lot of them are feeling challenged doing it, quite honestly. I guess the first is, what I see is going on that's sustainable is that young people are wanting to farm again. It used to feel very much like if you weren't landed or born into land, you would not be a farmer. And I had never imagined in my years that I would see so many young people coming to Colorado State University or to our program saying they want to be farmers when they grow up. And that's sustainable because we were getting old in our food community, and I think that's the most exciting thing going on. But I think one of the challenges is as they find out how challenging it's going to be to make that financially viable. And that not only goes for people who want to be farmers, but the fact that we still haven't addressed how we're going to pay people fairly for helping us grow food. And farm labor and farmers. And this is sad, I do consumer surveys, but we still have more concerns noted by respondents to surveys about the welfare of animals than we do about farm labor. And that's sad to me, and it's eye-opening. And I think that is not just US-based, that's globally. And I think it's a concern, and it comes back to how we get people to see what the fair price of food is, which I have not figured out the magic remedy for. But I think there are some pockets of people starting to show that they realize that, and they're trying to use the markets that are available to pay the prices they feel like farmers deserve for food. And I'm just praying that trickles down to the workers and interns that man farms, so that we do have young people in 10 years from now still wanting to be farmers because they haven't gotten somewhat burnt out. The second thing I would say that I think is exciting is the urban agriculture that is going on. We had greenhouses appear all over the country, especially in Colorado, to produce our ornamental horticulture that made our yards beautiful, or our flowers. Those started to shut down, and now we're seeing them reinvigorate again to grow food instead of pretty things. Not that pretty things are bad, but we seem to be spending more on them than what nourished us for a while. And I guess the third thing is that CSAs are just an example, but the really innovative marketing mechanisms producers are coming up with. I think of it as our localized Schwan truck. The fact that we have CSAs not only selling their own farms goods, but selling shares of other farmers' products. And we're getting closer and closer to seeing one-stop shops for people who want to buy local, and not just when they have time to get to farmers markets, but buy on a regularized, frequent enough basis that a producer can actually depend on it for their income. So I think those are the innovations I see that are encouraging to me, but they all have challenges with them as well.
So very quickly, rest of the panel, we're running out of time, and I'd like to, if you could just bullet a couple of these biggest threats and challenges to agriculture in Boulder County before we go to our takeaway question. Biggest threats and challenges.
Bulleted. Okay. Experienced farmers to manage the agricultural land. And that's, it's like you said, Don, Historically, it's been the only way you get into agriculture is through the tomb, the womb, or the groom. And there are more people getting into it, and we have to find ways to get them there, because land is expensive. If you haven't checked lately, and so finding a way to get people that weren't raised into ag is what we need to be helping, and I appreciate those people that are doing that. Water for agriculture. Water is continuing to increase in its value, and there are some ditch companies that I think the water is so expensive that it's hardly even it's hardly justifiable to use it for agriculture anymore. I'm not saying that I believe that, but I think that water is getting to be such a precious commodity for us in Boulder County and throughout Colorado that we're going to see it priced out of our market to really be useful for the prices that we're getting for crops. So that's a problem. Those are the main things I'll say just because of time. So thank you.
I think the biggest threat is people. It's the age of the producers. It's the lack of young people coming into farming. And again, on a specialty crop and small acreage vegetable production basis, I think that we're seeing some changes there. On the large scale grain farming, alfalfa grain, pinto beans, kind of large farming, there's still a real shortage of young people. Part of that is it's very hard work, and the returns on their investments are very challenging. So I think those are some things as well. Water infrastructure, maintaining high quality irrigation water supplies and delivery systems is very important. I think one of the other things facing agriculture in Boulder County is really the issue with tenant farmers and lack of long-term leasing and assurances in what they can expect from a policy perspective. And then as well support from the community for agriculture as part of the landscape.
I'll try and stick to the bullet points and go a little beyond Boulder County, but certainly development. And I see you're being proactive in addressing that, but it's a continuous pressure. Water, as Cindy said very well. Soil fertility and erosion potential of the soils here is certainly an ongoing threat. And then energy sources on into the future, as I talked about. And then a couple others, the Farm Bill implications. I mean, we have a dependency on subsidies and direct payments that prevents farmers from transitioning to organic methods or expanding their crop rotations to put in soil building crops. That's a huge threat to sustainability everywhere. And then just on the aging farm demographics and populations, I totally agree. The 2007 Ag Census showed the average age of farmers throughout the country is 57.3 years, but they found that the average age of organic farmers is 53.1 years. So we now have statistical proof that organic farming makes you younger.
Okay, well, what we're going to do, I'm going to give these guys a takeaway question, and we're going to skip the break since we're kind of rolling long here. And so I'm going to give you guys a takeaway question, and then we'll invite up Pam and Raul and our Rosemary Hyman from League of Women Voters. So your takeaway question, panelists, is what can citizens and communities do to support sustainable agriculture?
Well, I guess I already kind of said this, but, I love the know your farmer, know your food concept. It allows you to think lots of different versions of farming or what fits your value system. But if you don't have the respect to have a conversation with who's growing your food, you're not going to know if they're aligned with your values and whether what they're doing is sustainable in your eyes. And I guess the other thing I would say is even though that's been entrenched in the local movement, I think it's becoming more and more true for where you get your food from all over. Fair trade systems are making it possible for you to know more about what's coming from other countries as well. And the transparency they're trying to make around some certification programs for food are trying to give consumers information. So be educated. Know just as much about your food system as your local football team. So.
That's a lot. Well, I think, voting with your food dollar. We all vote every day by what we put in our mouth and what we spend our money on, and certainly making choices to purchase local and organic food, shopping at the farmer's market, joining a CSA, and supporting those producers is the first step. But growing a garden, being a producer yourself, no matter how small it is, but just being in touch with the soil, caring for plants, and cooking, teaching others to cook, getting back to eating real foods instead of highly processed, highly packaged fake foods or food-like substances. And knowing how the food is grown, and rejecting GMOs, asking questions, being informed, making noise, demanding a better food system.
I think that my take-home message is that agriculture is more and more in the news than it has ever been in most of our lifetimes. Luckily, none of us is going hungry. Along with that, I think that it's gotten very polarized. And it's almost like our political scene that we, thank goodness, just got done with this election and got past all of the anger and fervor and negativity. And I think what I would like to ask everybody to be more aware of is all of the people that produce our food. And they're not our opponent, or they're not our enemies. They really are people. Maybe there's differing ideologies, but what I want to say is that there's something to be learned from everybody. And there's something about sustainability from all facets of agriculture. I don't care if you're an organic producer, or if you're a vegan producer, or if you are running an operation that's 1,000 acres or more. I think that there's something that we all have to contribute to the discussion, and that there are values that we can all learn from and embrace, and as we're evolving, because I think we're all evolving in this process, and we're all hopeful for a better tomorrow where we can feed our young, feed our grandchildren with safe and healthy food. And thank God that we have the healthiest and the safest food in the world in the United States.
I really don't have much to add here after the other speakers, but again, the main take home is, like Cindy was saying, we can all learn from each other, and we all need to participate in the dialogue and be open in doing so. And I want to recognize the Food and Ag Policy Council. I found this draft strategic plan. I'm not sure if it's draft, but it ends in 2012, so if it is, it better get
We've got a couple members in the room tonight, so you guys
really applaud this kind of an effort, and then to take this, renew it, bring it further, and use it as a guidance document, have community involvement, but then have policy engagement at the commissioner level and with the staff to help support, again, consistency and the right kind of environmental outcomes that come from strategic planning and implementation. So we can all learn, whether we're a community garden, small farmer, large landscape scale agriculture, and there's a lot of it in this area, and I applaud the county for supporting it.
Help me thank these panelists. I understand from our videographer that he needs 3 minutes to change the tape, so we'll put more chairs up here, invite up Pam and Raul and Rosemary Hyman. And I think, David, since we're limited with microphones, maybe I'll ask panelists to raise their hand as questions are read in terms of being able to direct questions. We had hoped to be able to help, knowing some of these panelists' backgrounds, direct some of your questions to the most appropriate person. But as they're read, I think if you guys feel like you have a good handle on that question, to raise your hand for Rosemary and she'll acknowledge you.